"My mommy is sick," the little girl whispered, her voice perfectly steady, her eyes locked onto the most dangerous man in the room. "And her boss won't pay her. He says she doesn't deserve it." Victor Lawrence didn't move. He'd faced down killers, senators, and men who prayed to God right before they begged him for mercy. But nothing had ever stopped him cold the way those two sentences did. If you've ever watched someone work themselves to the bone for people who never deserve them, this story is for you. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. The lobby of the Blackwood Grand Hotel smelled like money, old money, the kind that had been polished and repolished until it stopped looking like anything real. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling that seemed miles above the marble floor. Every surface reflected something expensive back at itself. At 11:30 on a Thursday night, the front desk staff moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had been trained never to look too comfortable and never to look too stressed. Nobody paid any attention to the little girl sitting in the corner. She was maybe 7 years old, maybe 8, small for her age either way, with golden hair that someone had braided carefully that morning, though the braid had since loosened and was beginning to unravel at the ends. She wore an oversized winter coat, navy blue, the sleeves hanging past her wrists. On her lap sat a small purple backpack, and her hands were folded over it the way some people fold their hands in church. She wasn't crying. She wasn't fidgeting. She wasn't doing any of the things children do when they're scared or bored or overwhelmed. She was simply waiting. The bellhop near the elevator had noticed her 40 minutes ago. He'd told himself someone would come for her. A parent, a nanny, somebody. He'd checked twice since then, and both times she was still sitting there with those hands folded and those eyes fixed on the revolving front door like she was reading a book he couldn't see. A woman at the concierge desk had whispered something to her colleague. The colleague had shrugged. Night manager's problem, not ours. The night manager was in the back office pretending to review spreadsheets while actually scrolling through his phone, and he would not have cared either way. So the little girl sat, and then the revolving door moved. Victor Lawrence walked into the Blackwood Grand Hotel at 11:47, and the air in the lobby changed. It was subtle, a slight stiffening behind the front desk, a sudden renewed interest in tasks that had been abandoned, a bellhop who found somewhere else to look. The man who walked through that door didn't carry a weapon that anyone could see. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't do anything except exist in a room, and the room rearranged itself around him. He was 43 years old, built like a man who had never once in his life had the luxury of being soft. His dark suit was dry despite the rain that had been hammering the city for the past 2 hours. Someone had brought a car around. His dark brown hair was pushed back from his face. There was a tattoo curling up the right side of his neck, and another one visible on the back of his right hand, where it held his phone. And if you looked closely enough at his forearms, where his cuffs were folded back, you could see more of the same. Victor Lawrence was not the kind of man you looked at closely unless he invited you to. He crossed the lobby toward the elevator bank without acknowledging anyone. He had a room here, a standing arrangement, and he had a meeting in 40 minutes on the 22nd floor that he was not particularly looking forward to. His phone was already in his hand, already showing a chain of messages he was parsing with the part of his brain that was always working, always calculating, always 3 steps ahead of whatever problem was currently trying to catch up to him. He was 6 feet from the elevator when something made him stop. He didn't know what it was exactly. He'd spent enough years surviving on instinct that he'd long since stopped needing to explain every impulse to himself. His eyes moved to the left, to the little alcove near the decorative columns, and found the girl. She was looking at him, not the way people usually looked at him, not with that quick dart of recognition followed by the even quicker look away. She was just looking at him, steady, calm, the way a person looks at something they're trying to figure out. Victor changed direction. He walked toward her and stopped a few feet away, and she watched him come without flinching. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought. The seriousness of her face had thrown off his estimate. Her eyes were gray-blue and clear, and they tracked him with an intelligence that had no business being in a child's face. He crouched down so he wasn't towering over her. It was a deliberate choice, and he saw her register it. A small adjustment in her expression, not quite surprised, but close. "You've been here a while," he said. It wasn't a question, but she answered it. "Since 8:30. That's 3 hours. 3 hours and 17 minutes, she said. Victor looked at her for a moment. "Where are your parents?" "My mommy works here." A pause. "She's supposed to get off at 9. "And your dad?" Something moved across the girl's face, fast, like a cloud crossing the sun, and then it was gone. "He doesn't live with us." Victor nodded. He didn't push. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Victor. Do you want to tell me why you're sitting here alone at midnight instead of being home?" Lily looked at him for a long moment. He got the sense she was making a decision, not about whether to trust him exactly, but about whether he was worth the energy of an honest answer. Finally, she said, "My mommy is sick. She has a fever. She called me after school and said she was at work and feeling bad, but she couldn't leave. She told me to come here and wait for her." Another pause. "That was at 4 o'clock. Victor felt something move in his chest. He kept his face still. "She told you to come here at 4 and wait?" "She didn't want me to be alone at the apartment. She said the lobby was safe." Lily glanced toward the front desk, where 2 employees were now watching with carefully arranged expressions of not watching. "They know me here. I come sometimes." 7 hours ago, Victor said, half to himself. "She texted me at 6 and said she'd be done soon." Lily's hands tightened slightly on the backpack straps. "She texted me at 8 and said she was sorry, she was still working. She said she had to finish the inventory or Mr. Petrescu would take it out of her pay." A breath. "She didn't text me after that. My calls are going to voicemail." "Who's Mr. Petrescu?" "The manager." Lily said the word flatly, without inflection, which was somehow worse than if she'd said it with anger. "He's always making her stay late. He told her last month that she had 3 attendance marks against her, but she never missed a day. She showed me her calendar. She marks every day she goes in." A pause. "She bought a new calendar just for that." Victor was quiet for a moment. "How long has your mom worked here?" "Since before I started school. So like 4 years, maybe more." Lily thought about it. "She says she likes the work. She just doesn't like him." "What's your mom's name?" "Charlotte. Charlotte Webb." Victor stood up slowly. He looked toward the front desk, and the 2 employees who had been not watching suddenly found urgent reasons to look at their screens. He looked back at Lily. "Stay here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He almost smiled. Almost. He walked to the front desk and put both hands flat on the marble counter. The young man behind the desk looked up with the practiced pleasantness of someone who charged $700 a night for a standard room and was prepared to be pleasant about anything. "Charlotte Webb," Victor said. "Housekeeping. Where is she?" The young man's pleasantness flickered. "I'm sorry, sir. I wouldn't have access to employee." "I didn't ask if you had access," Victor said quietly. "I asked where she is." A beat. Let me check with the manager on duty." "Do that." The young man picked up the desk phone. Victor waited. He didn't look impatient. He didn't look anything at all, which was, in its own way, more unsettling than if he'd been visibly angry. The young man spoke quietly into the phone. Then he listened. Then he looked up with an expression that had gotten significantly more careful. Apparently she's still on the floor, sir. 12-hour shift. A pause. "She's been finishing the quarterly inventory." "Tonight?" "It's due by 6 a.m. Is she the only one doing it?" A longer pause. Another quiet exchange on the phone. Yes, sir, it appears so. Victor looked at the young man for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "Call your night manager out here." Sir, if there's a concern, I can certainly relay. Out here, Victor said. Now. The night manager, a man named Gerald with unfortunate sideburns and the perpetually defensive posture of someone who had spent his career covering himself, emerged from the back office 90 seconds later. He was already composing his face into the particular arrangement that hotel middle management used when dealing with difficult guests, a blend of deference and bureaucratic immovability that usually got the job done. He took one look at Victor Lawrence, and the composure cracked, just slightly, around the eyes. "Sir," Gerald said, "how can I help you this evening?" "Charlotte Webb," Victor said. "Housekeeping. She's been here since what time?" Gerald blinked. "I'm not sure I'm at liberty to—" "What time?" Gerald's throat moved. Her shift started at 9 this morning." Victor let that land. "It's coming up on midnight. The inventory—" "She has a child sitting in your lobby," Victor said, still quiet, still perfectly controlled, "who has been here since 8:30 because her mother is sick and couldn't leave. And you have had a 7-year-old girl sitting alone in this lobby for 3.5 hours. He paused. "That's what you're telling me." Gerald looked past Victor toward the alcove, and his face did something complicated. "I wasn't personally aware that—" "Get Charlotte Webb down here," Victor said, "right now. Whatever she's doing, it's done." "The inventory has to be—" "Done," Victor repeated. "Get her down here." Gerald picked up the desk phone with hands that were slightly less steady than they'd been a minute ago. Lily was still sitting exactly where Victor had left her when he came back. She watched him approach with those gray-blue eyes. "They're getting her," he said. For the first time, something shifted in Lily's face. It was small, a softening around the eyes, a release of tension so subtle that most people would have missed it entirely. But Victor didn't miss things. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet." He sat down in the chair next to her, not across from her, next to her, and rested his forearms on his knees. "Tell me something. Has your mom talked about any problems at work? Anything other than the overtime?" Lily considered the question with the seriousness she apparently gave to everything. "She doesn't like to worry me." "I know, but you pay attention." A slight pause. "Yeah. So tell me what you've noticed." Lily set the backpack on the cushion beside her. It was the first time she'd let go of it since he'd sat down, and he registered that without comment. "She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep," Lily said. "She goes in the bathroom, but I can hear her." A beat. "She never used to do that. Like, before last year, she didn't." "What changed last year?" "Mr. Petrescu got promoted. He used to just be a supervisor. Now he's the manager." Lily folded her hands in her lap again. "Mom got a letter in the spring saying she had 3 absences on her record. She called me into the kitchen and showed it to me and asked if she'd ever told me she was skipping work, and I said no, because she never had, not once. She was upset. She said the dates on the letter were days she was there. She had her calendar." A pause. "She sent a letter back saying the same thing. She never heard anything." Victor was very still. She disputed the attendance record. "She tried to. Nobody answered." "Who would have sent that letter?" "Mr. Petrescu signs everything." Victor looked at his hands. Something in his jaw had tightened, barely perceptible, but it was there. "My mom says he's been trying to make her quit," Lily continued. "She doesn't say it like that, but I hear her on the phone with her friend Diane sometimes. She tells Diane." A slight pause, and then something shifted in the girl's voice. Not quite anger, but the early, compressed architecture of it. "She's not going to quit. She's been here 6 years, not 4. I miscounted before. 6 years. This is her job. She earned it." "Yes," Victor said. "She did." The elevator dinged. The woman who came out of it looked like she had been running on fumes and willpower for a very long time. Charlotte Webb was 31 years old, slim in a way that suggested not enough eating rather than any kind of intention, with the same golden hair as her daughter. She was wearing her hotel uniform, the light gray vest over the white shirt, and there were dark circles under her eyes and a sheen of fever sweat on her forehead that was visible even from across the lobby. She was moving fast, scanning the room with the sharp, desperate alertness of a mother who has left her child waiting too long. And when she found Lily, the breath she let out was almost a sound. "Baby!" She crossed the lobby in long strides and dropped to her knees in front of her daughter, both hands on Lily's face, checking her the way parents check children when the fear hasn't quite let go yet. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry, Lily. I tried to—" "I'm okay, Mom." Lily let herself be held, but her eyes moved over her mother's shoulder to Victor. Charlotte felt the direction of her daughter's gaze and turned her head. She saw the man sitting in the chair next to where Lily had been. Tall, dark-suited, tattooed, watching them both with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. She stood up slowly, one hand still on Lily's shoulder. "I'm sorry, were you sitting with her?" "For about 20 minutes, Victor said. "She's been here since 8:30. Charlotte's face changed. I know, I couldn't—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I couldn't get away. I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No. I'm sorry, thank you for sitting with her." She was already reaching for Lily's backpack, already pulling her daughter close. The movement was automatic, maternal, the instinct of someone trying to gather up everything precious before something else went wrong. "We're going to head out, thank you, really." "Your manager told me you've been here since 9 this morning," Victor said. He wasn't moving. His voice was level. "That's 15 hours. Charlotte's spine straightened slightly. "The inventory had to be finished." "Alone?" A pause. "There are procedures." "He didn't give you help." It wasn't quite a question, and Charlotte's answer was the slight tension in her jaw. "I handled it." "You handled it sick." "I'm fine." "You're running a fever," Victor said. "I can see it from here." Another pause. Lily looked up at her mother. Charlotte looked at Victor Lawrence, and he watched her make the calculation. Who is this man? Is this safe? What does he want? And he let her look, because it was a reasonable calculation, and she was right to make it. "I don't know who you are," she said carefully. "Victor Lawrence. I stay here sometimes. I know the owner." A beat. "And tomorrow morning I'm going to have a conversation with your manager, Mr. Petrescu, about attendance records and inventory shifts, and what exactly has been happening to your pay." The color shifted in Charlotte's face. Something cautious and something else. Something that looked like it had been hoping for a very long time and had trained itself not to. "You don't have to do that." "I know." You don't owe me anything." "No," Victor said, "I don't." Charlotte looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Lily, who was watching her mother with those old, patient, too knowing eyes. Then she looked back at him. "Mr. Petrescu isn't going to care what a guest says," she said quietly. He has a way of making things worse for people who complain." "He won't make things worse for you," Victor said. Something in the certainty of it made her go quiet. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. Charlotte looked down. Lily said nothing, just looked at her mother, and then looked at Victor, and then back at her mother, with an expression that said more than most adults could manage in a paragraph. Charlotte looked exhausted. She looked sick. She looked like a woman who had been fighting something for a long time and wasn't sure she had much left. But she looked at her daughter's face and seemed to find something there that steadied her. "We need to get you home," Charlotte said softly. "You have school." "I know." Charlotte reached into her vest pocket and pulled out her phone. Her face tightened when she looked at the screen. She typed something quickly, then looked up. "I'm calling us a cab." "I'll arrange a car," Victor said. "That's not, it's late, it's raining, and you're sick." His voice was matter of fact, not generous, just rational. "Let me arrange a car." Lily looked up at her mother. Charlotte hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, "Okay." Victor was already on his phone. While they waited, Lily sat back down in her chair. Not because she was tired, Victor thought, but because she was the kind of child who found the nearest fixed point and returned to it. He sat beside her again. Charlotte stood a few feet away, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder, watching him with an expression she was trying to keep neutral and not quite succeeding. "How long has he been doing this?" Victor said. "The false records." Charlotte glanced at him. "I said you don't have to." "I know. How long?" A pause. Long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then, "Since he got promoted, about 14 months, she said it quietly. "I've disputed it. Nothing happened." "And the pay?" Another pause. "He's been docking me for the absences that aren't real. And there was a broken cart 6 months ago, and he said it was my fault and docked me for it. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't even on that floor." She stopped. Her voice had gone very flat, which he recognized as the tone people used when they'd told a story enough times that the emotion had worn smooth. "Last month my check was $400 short." $400? I asked him about it. He showed me a sheet. All these deductions. I didn't recognize half of them. He told me if I had a problem I could take it up with HR. A beat. HR is his assistant. Lily was looking at her shoes. "I have everything written down," Charlotte said. "Dates, amounts, everything. I kept records because I thought—" She stopped. "I didn't know what I thought. I just kept them." "Good," Victor said. "I'm going to need those." Charlotte looked at him with an expression that had moved past caution into something more complicated. "Why are you doing this?" Victor looked at Lily. Lily was still looking at her shoes, but she'd gone very still in the particular way she went still when she was paying close attention to something she wasn't supposed to be tracking. "Because someone should," he said. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough of it. The car arrived 7 minutes later. Victor walked them out. At the door, Charlotte stopped and turned back to him, and he could see the calculation still moving behind her eyes. Gratitude, wariness, the particular complexity of accepting help from someone you don't understand. "My daughter said something to you," she said. "Before I came down, whatever she said." "She told me you're sick," Victor said, "and that your boss won't pay you." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Her jaw moved. Then she said, very quietly, "She shouldn't have to know about any of that." "No," Victor agreed. "She shouldn't." Lily, standing at the car door the driver was holding open, turned back and looked at Victor across the wet pavement. The rain was still coming down. The light from the hotel entrance caught her face. "Good night, Victor," she said. "Good night, Lily." He watched the car pull away. He stood there for a moment after the taillights disappeared, rain spotting the shoulders of his suit, and then he turned and walked back into the lobby. Gerald, the night manager, was still at the desk. He watched Victor come back in with the expression of a man who had made several decisions in the past 20 minutes about where, exactly, he was going to be when the sun came up. Victor walked past him without looking at him. He took out his phone and called a number he didn't often need to call this early in an evening. The line picked up on the second ring. "I need everything on a man named Doran Petrescu," Victor said. "Manager at the Blackwood Grand. Everything. Tonight." A pause on the other end. "How deep?" "Deep enough," Victor said, and stepped into the elevator. The file on Doran Petrescu arrived at 2:17 in the morning. Victor was still awake. He was always still awake at 2:17 in the morning. Sleep was something he scheduled the way other men scheduled meetings, deliberately and without sentimentality. And tonight he hadn't scheduled it yet. He was sitting with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, a glass of water on the table beside him that he hadn't touched, when his phone buzzed with the encrypted message from a man named Radu, who handled the kind of research that didn't show up in public records. He read it once, quickly. Then he read it again, slowly. Then he set the phone down and sat very still for a moment. Dorin Petrescu was 51 years old, originally from Constanța, Romania, naturalized 12 years ago. He'd worked in hospitality management for 19 years across 4 hotels, 3 cities. On paper, his record was clean. Performance reviews that were uniformly good, no formal complaints that had gone anywhere, a LinkedIn profile that described him as a results-driven hospitality professional with a passion for operational excellence. The kind of man who showed up to industry conferences and collected business cards and had a firm handshake. Off paper was another matter. 2 former employees at his previous hotel, a Marriott property in Philadelphia, had filed wage complaints with the Department of Labor 3 years ago. Both complaints had been withdrawn within 60 days of filing. One of the women involved had relocated to another state shortly after. The other had simply disappeared from any traceable employment record for 14 months. Radu had noted, without editorializing, that the withdrawals had occurred within a week of each other, and that no settlement amounts had been made public. There were also financial transfers that Radu had flagged. Not large amounts, not the kind that triggered automatic scrutiny, but a pattern. Recurring deposits into an LLC registered in Delaware that had no publicly listed purpose or employees, traced through 2 shell accounts to a personal account in Petrescu's wife's name. The deposits correlated with reasonable consistency to payroll periods at the Blackwood Grand. Skimming, sloppy enough to be amateur, careful enough to have lasted at least 16 months without triggering an audit. Victor picked up his phone again and texted Radu, "Who owns the Blackwood Grand?" The answer came back in 4 minutes. Holding company, Blackwood Hospitality Group. Principal investor, Gerald Whitmore, Chicago. Secondary investor, 22% stake, Galu Barbu, registered in New Jersey. Victor read that name twice. Galu Barbu. He typed, "Find me everything on Barbu. Full background, connection to a Charlotte Web, currently employed at the hotel." He sent it and put the phone down and picked up the glass of water and finally drank it. Charlotte Webb, 6 years at the Blackwood Grand, a little girl who kept a calendar to prove her mother went to work every single day, $400 missing from a paycheck, false attendance records, a manager who had done this before, in another city, to other women, and walked away clean. Victor had spent 20 years in rooms where cruelty was just arithmetic. He understood, better than most, that the world was full of Dorin Petrescus, small men with just enough authority to make other people's lives miserable, running their small corruptions inside the larger machinery of institutions that didn't ask too many questions because the questions were inconvenient. He had no illusions about the world being fair, but there was a difference between knowing cruelty existed and watching a 7-year-old girl sit alone in a hotel lobby for 3.5 hours because her sick mother couldn't leave work. Some things Victor had decided a long time ago he was not prepared to walk past. He called Radu again at 6 a.m. and told him to keep digging. Then he got dressed, ordered coffee from room service, and waited. Petrescu arrived at the hotel at 8:45. Victor knew because he'd asked the front desk, the day staff, not Gerald, to let him know when the manager came in. The call came while Victor was on his second cup of coffee, and he was in the lobby 4 minutes later. Petrescu was a compact man, well-dressed, with a particular kind of confidence that came from having been the most important person in every room he'd occupied for the past decade. He was sorting through a stack of papers at the front desk when Victor approached him, and he looked up with the automatic professional smile of a hotel manager about to greet a guest. The smile adjusted when he saw Victor's face. "Mr. Lawrence," he said. He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Gerald would have called him the moment Victor had left the lobby last night. "I understand you had some concerns last evening. I want to personally assure you..." Charlotte Webb, Victor said. Petrescu's expression didn't break. He was good. Yes, I understand you had an interaction with one of our housekeeping staff. If there was a service issue, her attendance record, Victor said, show it to me. A pause. Professional and brief, but it was there. I'm not sure that's something I'm at liberty to. 3 absences in the spring. The dates. Victor's voice was pleasant, measured. Tell me the dates. Petrescu set down his papers. He seemed to make a decision. The decision of a man who had handled difficult guests before, who knew that the best play was to appear cooperative while giving away nothing. I'd be happy to look into the matter and follow up with you. Right now, Victor said, I have a morning briefing in. The briefing can wait. Something moved in Petrescu's eyes. Not quite fear, more like the recalibration of a man who was adjusting his estimate of how serious this was. Of course, he said, with the smoothness of someone who had decided to play the long game. Follow me. The office was small and orderly, the kind of space that told you more about a man's need for control than any conversation could. Petrescu sat behind the desk and opened his computer with the deliberate calm of someone who had decided that calm was his best weapon. Victor sat across from him and waited. Charlotte Webb, Petrescu said, typing. Let me pull up her file. Take your time. A pause. Typing. Then, here we are. He turned the monitor slightly, not enough to fully share it, but enough to perform the gesture of sharing. 3 documented absences, March 4th, March 9th, and April 2nd. She disputes all 3. Employees sometimes, she kept a calendar, Victor said, personal calendar. She marked every day she came in. She has documentation going back 2 years. Petrescu was quiet for a moment. I'm sure she keeps excellent records, but our records were created by you. The room went still. Not an angry still, a precise one. Victor watched Petrescu decide, in real time, which version of this conversation he was going to have. That's a serious accusation, Petrescu said. Yes, Victor said, it is. I want to be clear that I don't appreciate $400, Victor said, her last paycheck. Walk me through the deductions. Another pause, longer this time. There were several documented. Walk me through them. There were attendance deductions, and there was an equipment incident in October. The broken cart. That's correct. She wasn't on that floor. Our records indicate your records, Victor said again. Petrescu leaned back slightly in his chair. His hands were very still on the desk. When he spoke again, his voice had shed the professional warmth and gone somewhere cooler. Mr. Lawrence, I understand you have a personal interest in this situation, and I respect that you're a valued guest. But personnel matters are internal to. Let me tell you what I know, Victor said. Petrescu stopped. I know about the 2 women in Philadelphia, Victor said, Maria Hennessy and Donna Park. I know about the Labor Department complaints that were withdrawn. I know about the Delaware LLC. I know about the transfers. He paused. I know about Galu Barbu. The name landed in the room like a stone dropping into still water. Petrescu's face went through 3 expressions in the space of 2 seconds, and Victor cataloged all of them. Surprise, recognition, calculation, and underneath all 3, something that looked very much like fear. I don't know what you think you know, Petrescu started. You're going to release Charlotte Webb's full back pay, Victor said. Everything you've docked since you took this position. You're going to correct her attendance record. You're going to do both of those things before noon today. And you're going to do them quietly. And you're going to make sure that her position here is secure and that she never works a 15-hour shift alone again. Petrescu stared at him. You can't walk into my office and tell me, I just did. I have legal standing here. I have a contract with this hotel, and I will not be. Noon, Victor said. He stood up. I'll be in the restaurant. Come find me when it's done. He left the office before Petrescu could answer. He ordered breakfast in the hotel restaurant and ate it methodically, the way he did most things, completely without wasted motion. His phone was face down on the table. He was halfway through his eggs when it buzzed. He turned it over. Radu Galu Barbu, born Bucharest 1971, naturalized 2009. Real estate, minor hospitality investments, secondary stake in Blackwood Grand acquired 2021. Prior name, Gabriel Barbu, changed 2008. Previous marriage to American citizen Charlotte Ann Marsden, 2013 to 2018. One child. Victor set his fork down. He read it again. Gabriel Barbu, changed his name. Charlotte Ann Marsden, her maiden name. Charlotte Webb was the name she'd taken after the marriage ended, and Barbu held 22% of the hotel where she worked. He thought about Petrescu, the false records, the docked pay, the methodical, grinding pressure, not enough to fire her outright, but enough to break her down over time. Enough to make her quit or fail or fall apart. He thought about Lily saying, "He's always making her stay late. He told her last month that she had 3 attendance marks against her." He thought about Charlotte saying, "He has a way of making things worse for people who complain." This wasn't a corrupt manager running a small-time skimming operation. This was deliberate, targeted. Someone had pointed Petrescu at Charlotte Webb like a weapon and told him to pull the trigger slowly, and that someone owned part of the building she worked in. Victor put $50 on the table, stood up, and walked back toward the elevator. He called Radu on the way. "Barbu," he said, "custody arrangements. The child's name is Lily. Find out if there's an active case." "How fast?" "Now." He was back in his room in 4 minutes. He stood at the window and thought, which was what he did when the shape of something became clear and he needed to decide what to do with it. The shape of this was ugly. A man who had been Charlotte's husband. A man who now held a financial stake in the hotel where she worked. A man who had, at some point in the past year, found a willing instrument in Duran Petrescu. A man who had his own history of this kind of thing, which meant Barbu would have known what he was getting when he brought Petrescu in. The position at the Blackwood Grand had become available 16 months ago. Petrescu had been hired 14 months ago. The false attendance records had started 14 months ago. The timing wasn't coincidence, which meant the question wasn't whether Barbu had orchestrated this. The question was why. What did a man gain from engineering the slow financial destruction of his ex-wife? His phone rang. Radu. "Active custody dispute," Radu said. "Filed 8 months ago by the father, Gabriel Barbu, requesting primary custody modification. Previous arrangement was primary residence with mother, standard visitation. The filing argues that the mother's financial instability and work schedule make her an unfit primary caregiver." Victor said nothing for a moment. "The filing specifically references," Radu continued, "the careful neutrality of a man reading something that he found distasteful. Erratic attendance at her place of employment, evidence of financial mismanagement, and," this is a direct quote, "an inability to provide stable care for the minor child due to circumstances of her own making." Circumstances of her own making. Attendance records that Petrescu had falsified. Pay that Petrescu had stolen. A financial hole that had been dug for her, deliberately, by a manager who had been placed in that position by the man who was using the evidence of that hole to take her daughter. Victor sat down on the edge of the bed. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. He thought about Lily in that lobby, 3.5 hours alone. A 7-year-old girl with a purple backpack and gray-blue eyes that were too old for her face, waiting for a mother who couldn't come because the system that was supposed to protect them both had been turned into a weapon against them. He thought about Charlotte's hands on her daughter's face when she came off that elevator, checking her, making sure she was real. the reflexive terror of a mother who had been afraid of losing something and hadn't let herself say it out loud. He thought about a calendar in a kitchen, a woman marking every single day she went to work, because she had already understood on some level that someone was building a case against her. She'd known. She'd known something was wrong, and she'd been keeping records, and she still hadn't known the whole shape of it. How could she? You didn't look at your ex-husband and assume he'd bought into your employer specifically to manufacture the grounds to take your child. That was the kind of thing that existed in the gap between what people believed other people were capable of and what they actually were. Victor stood up. He called a number he hadn't used in 8 months. It rang twice. "Marcus," Victor said, "I need a family law attorney. Best one in the city. Today." Today. A pause. "I'll have a name for you in an hour." 30 minutes. He hung up. He called Radu back. "Everything you have on Barbu," Victor said. "Financial records, the LLC connections, the timing of the Blackwood Grand investment, the custody filing, and anything connecting him directly to Petrescu. I want a document, clean, sourced, usable. For a lawyer," Victor said, "and for whatever else needs to happen." He was pulling on his jacket when his phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. He didn't recognize it, but the message was brief and the area code was local. "I know who you are. We should talk. D. Petrescu." Victor read it twice. Then he smiled, not warmly. The way a man smiles when a door opens that he'd expected to stay shut a little longer. He typed back, "Restaurant, 20 minutes." Petrescu was already there when Victor arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, and the expression of a man who had spent the past 3 hours reconsidering his life choices. He was still well-dressed. He still sat straight, but something in the set of his shoulders had changed since the morning. Victor sat down across from him and said nothing. He waited. "How much do you know?" Petrescu said. "Enough. About Barbu." "Tell me your version." Petrescu looked at his coffee cup. "He approached me before I took the position. I knew him through a mutual contact in Philadelphia. He knew about the situation there, the complaints." A pause. "He said he wasn't interested in that. He said he needed someone in the manager position at Blackwood who could handle a personnel situation discreetly." "Discreetly," Victor said. "He said the woman had been causing problems, that she was unreliable, that she'd been filing complaints against his investment interest, that he needed documentation to support a legal matter." Petrescu's jaw moved. "He offered me the position and a supplemental arrangement. I needed the work. The Philadelphia situation had made things difficult." "So you took it?" "I took it. A beat. He gave me the dates he wanted in the records, the amounts he wanted docked. He knew the hotel's systems. He had access through his investor stake. He told me what to put where and made sure the audit trail looked clean." Petrescu looked up. "I knew it was wrong. I want you to know I knew." "That doesn't interest me," Victor said. "What interests me is documentation." "I kept copies," Petrescu said, "of everything. His instructions, the original, unaltered records, the transfers." He put both hands flat on the table. "I kept them because I'm not completely stupid. I knew at some point I might need them." Victor looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" Petrescu's face did something that might have been shame, or might have been pragmatism, or might have been both at once. "Because you said his name this morning and didn't flinch, which means you know things I didn't expect anyone to know. And because..." He stopped. "I saw the little girl last night. Before I called her mother down, I saw her sitting there." He looked away. "I have a daughter. She's 12. Victor was quiet for a moment. "Get me the documentation," he said. "Everything. Today." Petrescu nodded. "And fix Charlotte Webb's records before noon," Victor said. "That part still stands." "Yes." Victor stood up. He looked down at Petrescu, Not with contempt, exactly, but with the clear-eyed assessment of a man who had made his calculation and arrived at a number. "You should know," he said, "that whatever immunity you're hoping for from this conversation is conditional on everything you've told me being true and complete. If I find out you've left something out, the arrangement changes." "I haven't left anything out." "Good." Victor walked out of the restaurant and into the lobby and took out his phone. Marcus had texted him a name and a number. He dialed it as he stepped outside. The attorney picked up on the third ring. Her name was Catherine Hale, and her voice had the particular quality of someone who had spent 20 years in courtrooms and had run out of patience for preamble. "Ms. Hale," Victor said, "my name is Victor Lawrence. I have a custody case I need you to look at today. The father has been manufacturing evidence against the mother through her employer. I have documentation." A pause. "The child is 7 years old. Her name is Lily." A silence on the other end. Then, "Send me what you have. I'll have it to you within 2 hours. I'll clear my afternoon," she said. He hung up. He stood on the sidewalk in the thin morning light and thought about a little girl who had looked at him across a wet parking lot and said, "Good night, Victor," with the gravity of someone who had learned early that good nights were not guaranteed. He thought about what Barbu had built, the patience of it, the architecture, 16 months of slow, invisible damage, each piece deniable on its own, adding up to something that looked, from the outside, like a woman falling apart under the weight of her own choices, circumstances of her own making. Charlotte had been fighting blindfolded, working 15-hour shifts, disputing letters that no one answered, keeping calendars to prove something she shouldn't have had to prove, watching her paycheck get smaller every month and not knowing why, not knowing that the man who had once been her husband had bought a piece of the building she cleaned and aimed its management at her like a gun. She'd been fighting alone. That was over now. Victor put his phone in his pocket and walked back inside. He had calls to make and a document to build and a meeting to arrange, and the morning was still young, and Doran Petrescu still had a file to deliver. And somewhere across the city, Charlotte Webb was waking up next to her daughter and didn't yet know that the ground beneath her feet had just shifted. She would know soon. Catherine Hale called back at 11:42. Victor was in his room when the call came, sitting with Petrescu's folder spread across the desk. 23 pages of printed records, screenshots, and bank transfer confirmations that the man had delivered in a sealed envelope 2 hours earlier. Hands steady, but eyes not quite meeting Victor's when he handed it over. Victor had gone through every page twice and sent photographs to Radu for verification before forwarding the full package to Catherine's secure email. "I've reviewed the documentation," Catherine said. She didn't waste time on preamble. He'd already decided he liked her. "It's significant. The falsified attendance records are provable. The original, unaltered file timestamps show the edits were made after the fact. And we have the instruction chain from Barbu to Petrescu. The wage theft is documented. The timing correlation between the custody filing and the start of the harassment pattern is..." A pause. "It's not subtle." He wasn't trying to be subtle. He was betting no one would look. "He was right," Victor said. "Until now." "Has Ms. Webb been served with anything yet regarding the custody modification?" "I don't know. I haven't spoken to her this morning." "She needs to know today," Catherine said. "If there's a hearing date, I need to know it immediately. These things move faster than people expect once they're in motion." A beat. "Has she had representation?" "I don't know that either." "She needs representation, mine specifically." A pause that was not modest, just factual. "I've overturned 3 manufactured evidence custody cases in the past 4 years. This pattern is one I recognize. The methodology is almost textbook. Isolate the mother financially, document the resulting instability, present it to a judge as a character failing." Her voice had gone precise and cold in the way of someone who had seen this enough times to have very clear feelings about it. It works surprisingly often because most mothers in that situation don't have the resources to fight back properly. This one will, Victor said. A brief silence. I'll need a retainer. Send me the number. She sent it while they were still on the phone. It was significant. Victor authorized it without looking twice. One more thing, Catherine said. Barbu's attorney, do you know who he's using? Not yet. Find out. The quality of his legal team will tell us how serious he is about this going to court versus using it as leverage. Victor wrote that down. I'll have it for you this afternoon. He hung up and immediately called Radu. While the line was ringing, he checked the time. 11:48. He told Petrescu noon for the corrected records. He sent a text. Clock's running. Petrescu replied in under a minute. Done. Corrections submitted. Back pay authorization signed. Victor stared at that message for a moment. He hadn't actually expected it to be that clean. Most men in Petrescu's position would have stalled, would have found a procedural reason to delay, would have at least tried to negotiate. The fact that he hadn't meant one of two things. Either he was genuinely trying to get out from under this, or he was afraid of something Victor hadn't fully accounted for yet. He filed that uncertainty away. Radu answered on the fourth ring. Barbu's attorney, Victor said. I need a name. Give me an hour. 40 minutes. He showered and changed and was back at his desk in 20 minutes. And in that time, he had received a text from an unsaved number with a 973 area code, New Jersey, that said, I hear you've been asking about me. That's a mistake. G.B. Victor read it 3 times. Then he set his phone on the desk and looked at it. Barbu knew, which meant Petrescu had told him, or someone else had, or Barbu had his own people watching. Any of those possibilities said something about the man, either that his network was tighter than Victor had assumed, or that Petrescu was playing both sides, or both. He typed back, Then we should meet, tonight, name the place. He pressed send and waited. The reply took 6 minutes, an address, a time, 8 p.m. And then, after a pause, one more line, come alone. Victor almost laughed. He didn't reply. Instead, he called Charlotte. She picked up on the second ring, and her voice had the slightly careful quality of someone who had been thinking about a phone call they weren't sure was coming. Mr. Lawrence? Victor, he said, a small pause. Victor, how are you feeling? Better, a beat. Lily made me tea this morning. She found a recipe on YouTube and followed it exactly. She's very thorough. Something shifted in Victor's chest that he didn't examine. Good. I need to talk to you about some things. Are you home? Yes, Lily's at school. Her voice changed slightly, the carefulness sharpening into alertness. What things? I'd rather do this in person. A longer pause. Okay. He was at her apartment 40 minutes later. It was on the 4th floor of a building that was clean and decent and spoke clearly of a woman who kept her space with dignity on a budget that didn't allow for anything extra. She opened the door in a gray sweater and jeans, her hair down, the fever visibly gone from her face, but the tiredness still layered underneath. She looked at him with the expression she'd had the night before, that careful, complicated mixture of gratitude and wariness, and stepped back to let him in. Coffee? She said. Sure. He sat at the kitchen table while she made it, and he looked at the refrigerator without meaning to and saw the calendar. A plain paper calendar, the kind you get for free at a pharmacy, pinned to the side of the fridge with a magnet that said, World's Best Mom, in letters that had been colored in with what looked like marker, probably by Lily. Every single day that Charlotte had worked was marked with a small, neat checkmark in blue pen. Every single one. Charlotte set a mug in front of him and sat across the table. She wrapped both hands around her own mug and looked at him directly. Tell me. He told her. He started with Petrescu, the false records, the wage deductions, the documentation, the correction that had been submitted that morning. He watched her face as he talked. She was very still, the way she'd been still when she told him about the $400, and her jaw was doing the thing it did when she was keeping her reaction contained by force of will. When he told her about the back pay authorization, she exhaled through her nose and pressed her lips together hard. And for a moment her eyes went bright, and then she got control of it. "How much?" she said. Her voice was steady. "I don't have the exact total yet. 14 months of documented deductions. It's significant." She nodded. She took a sip of her coffee. Her hands were steady. "Okay, and Petrescu, is he going to?" "He's cooperating," Victor said. "He gave me documentation. He's covering himself, which means he's going to keep cooperating." Charlotte nodded again. And then Victor said, "There's more," and she looked at him, and he could tell from her face that she already knew there was more. Some part of her had always known there was more. "Galu Barbu," he said. Charlotte's hands tightened on the mug, slightly, barely perceptible, but he saw it. "What about him?" "He has a 22% stake in the Blackwood Grand," Victor said. "He's held it since 2021. He brought Petrescu in 14 months ago and directed the falsification of your records specifically." The kitchen was very quiet. Charlotte stopped. She set down her mug with a small, careful click. "He owns part of the hotel." "Yes." She looked at the table, then at the calendar on the fridge, then back at Victor, and her expression had shifted into something he hadn't seen on her face before. Not quite anger, not quite devastation, something between them, something that had been a suspicion for a long time and had just been confirmed. And the confirmation was both worse and better than not knowing. "The custody filing," she said. Victor was quiet. "He filed 8 months ago." Her voice had dropped. "He said I was unstable, financially, that my work record showed." She stopped. Her hand had come up to her mouth. "Oh, God!" "Charlotte, he built it." She was talking almost to herself now. "He built the whole thing. The attendance marks, the deductions, all of it. He built it and then he used it to..." She broke off. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't break. "He's trying to take Lily." "He's been trying," Victor said. "He hasn't succeeded." "There's a hearing," Charlotte said. "March 28th. I have a court-appointed attorney. She's trying, but she has 40 other cases, and she told me it wasn't looking..." She stopped again. "She told me the documentation against me was compelling." "It was manufactured," Victor said, "and we can prove it." "We?" He looked at her steadily. "I've retained Catherine Hale. She's reviewed Petrescu's documentation and the full background on Barbu. She's cleared her afternoon to speak with you. March 28th gives us time, if we move today." Charlotte stared at him. "Catherine Hale is one of the most expensive family law attorneys in the..." "I know. I can't..." "It's handled." "Victor," her voice cracked slightly on his name, and she seemed surprised by it, and she pressed her lips together and looked away for a moment before looking back. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "I know you don't. We don't know each other. You don't owe me anything. You said that yourself last night." "I did." "So why?" "Because Lily sat alone in that lobby for 3.5 hours, Victor said. "And because your ex-husband bought a piece of the building you work in and pointed its management at you like a weapon. And because you've been keeping a calendar on your refrigerator for 14 months, trying to prove something you shouldn't have to prove." He paused. "And because someone should have done this sooner, and no one did, and I'm here now." Charlotte looked at him for a long time. He let her look. He understood the need to take the measure of something before you trusted it. Finally, she said, "Does Galu know?" "That I'm involved?" "Yes. He texted me this morning." Her eyes widened slightly. "What did he say?" "That it was a mistake to ask about him." Victor paused. "I told him to meet me tonight." Victor, you don't... He's not... She stopped. Something moved in her face, something careful and old. He's not a good person. I know that sounds like something a bitter ex-wife says, but I mean it in a specific way. He has connections. He does things quietly and then denies them, and it's very hard to... I know what he is, Victor said. The way he said it made her go still. She studied him for a moment, really studied him, the same way Lily had looked at him the first night, trying to read something beyond the surface. Her eyes moved to the tattoo on his neck, and then back to his face. "Who are you?" she said, not afraid, genuinely asking. "Someone who does things quietly," Victor said, "and doesn't deny them." It wasn't a complete answer. She seemed to understand it was all she was going to get right now, and she made the same calculation her daughter had made in the lobby. Was this worth the energy of an honest response? And she arrived at the same answer Lily had. "Okay," she said. "Call Catherine Hale," Victor said. He pushed a business card across the table. "Now, while Lily's still at school. Tell her everything, the custody filing, every court date, every communication from Barbu's attorney. Don't leave anything out." Charlotte picked up the card and looked at it. "Okay." He stood up to go. She stood too, automatically, and then said, "Victor." He looked back. "If this works, if this actually works, I need to be able to explain to Lily someday why a man she met in a hotel lobby spent his own money and time to..." She stopped. "She's going to ask me." She asks about everything. "Tell her the truth," Victor said, "that someone saw what was happening and decided it was going to stop." Charlotte nodded slowly. Something had settled in her face. Not relief yet, not quite, but the beginning of something that might become relief if the next 2 weeks went the way they needed to go. He left. He was back at the hotel by 2 o'clock. Radu had sent him Barbu's attorney's name by then. A man named Sterling Price, boutique firm, expensive, the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to win and didn't care what winning looked like. He forwarded the name to Catherine Hale. Her response came back in 8 minutes. "I know him. He's good. He's also beatable. I'll be ready." At 3 o'clock, Victor's phone rang. Unknown number, but the voice on the other end was not unknown. It was male, accented, and it spoke with the deliberate ease of a man who had decided to establish something before the evening's meeting. "You've been busy," Galu Barbu said. Victor said nothing. "I know about Petrescu," Barbu continued. "I know about the attorney. I know you've been talking to Charlotte." A pause. "You're moving very fast for a man who just met her 2 days ago." "I'm efficient," Victor said. "You're making a mistake," Barbu said. "This is a family matter, a legal proceeding between 2 parents about the welfare of their child. Whatever Charlotte has told you..." "She didn't tell me most of it," Victor said. "I found it myself." A silence, shorter than it should have been. "Whatever you think you found, you bought into the hotel in 2021, Victor said. "You placed Petrescu in April of 2024. You gave him specific dates to enter into the attendance system. You directed the wage deductions. You filed the custody modification 8 months ago using the documentation you'd manufactured. The LLC in Delaware, the transfers." He paused. "Should I keep going?" The silence on the other end this time was longer. "You're not a lawyer," Barbu said. His voice had cooled. "And whatever documentation you think you have is..." "It's real," Victor said. "Petrescu kept copies of your instructions, emails, transfer records, original file timestamps that show when the records were altered." A beat. He was protecting himself, smart actually, in a limited way. "Petrescu," Barbu said very quietly, and the name came out like a verdict. "We'll talk tonight," Victor said. 8 o'clock. "If you think you can walk into a room and tell me..." "I'll see you at 8, Victor said, and hung up. He stood there for a moment after the call ended, listening to the quiet of the room. His heartbeat was even. It was always even. That was something he'd had to learn when he was young and afraid, and the world was bigger and more violent than any child should have to navigate alone. How to make his heart beat even, how to make his face still, how to take the fear and the anger and compress them down into something cold and functional. He was very good at it by now, but underneath the evenness, something was running hot. He thought about a custody filing that described Charlotte's circumstances as being of her own making. He thought about the precision of it, a man spending years engineering a trap, patient and methodical, buying his way into his ex-wife's workplace, installing his instrument, and then watching from a distance as the walls closed in around her. Not for any practical reason, she posed no threat to him. He clearly wasn't fighting for Lily out of love. If he'd loved Lily, he wouldn't have used her as a legal leverage point, wouldn't have manufactured the conditions that put a 7-year-old alone in a hotel lobby at midnight. This was about control. The specific punishing need of a certain kind of man to ensure that a woman who had left him understood, in perpetuity, that leaving came with consequences. Victor knew men like that. He had grown up adjacent to men like that. He had, at various points in his life, been forced to deal with men like that in ways that hadn't involved attorneys or documentation. Tonight would be different, but only slightly. His phone buzzed, a text from Charlotte. "I talked to Catherine. She said," a pause in the message thread then, "she said we have a real case. She said it's going to be okay. She actually said that." Another pause. "Victor, thank you." He read it twice. Then he put the phone down and started preparing for the evening. At 4:15, Radu sent him one final piece of information that he hadn't asked for, but that Radu had found in the course of digging. A note at the bottom of a longer message, prefaced with the words, "Thought you should know." Barbu had filed a motion 2 weeks ago, a request to have Lily's primary residence transferred pending the March 28th hearing. The judge had not yet ruled on it. If the judge granted it, Lily could be moved before the hearing even took place. Victor looked at that message for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called Catherine Hale back, and when she answered, he said, "The preliminary residence motion. Can we block it?" "I was just about to call you about that," she said. Her voice was tight. "I need everything you have on Barbu. All of it. Tonight. I need to file a counter motion tomorrow morning. You'll have it by 9 p.m. Make it 8. "Done," Victor said. He hung up and looked at the address Barbu had sent him. 8 o'clock. He looked at Catherine's deadline. 8 o'clock. He rearranged his evening and made 3 phone calls, and at the end of the third one, he had what he needed. Then he got ready to go meet the man who had spent 14 months trying to take a little girl from her mother. He'd been in worse rooms, with worse men, but very few of them had made him feel quite this specific and focused kind of cold. The place Barbu had chosen was a private dining room in the back of a restaurant that cost $400 a plate and knew how to keep its clientele's business invisible. Victor had been in rooms like it before, the kind of place where powerful men conducted conversations they needed no record of, where the staff was paid well enough to have selective memory and the walls were thick enough to absorb whatever needed absorbing. He arrived at 7:58. Barbu was already there. He was a well-built man in his mid-50s, the kind of physical presence that had probably been imposing at 40 and had since settled into something heavier and more deliberate. He was wearing a dark blazer over an open collar, and his hair had gone mostly silver, and he sat at the head of the small table with the practiced stillness of a man who had learned that stillness communicated power. His attorney, Sterling Price, sat to his right, lean, 50, the kind of face that had spent decades expressing nothing in courtrooms. There was a third man at the table that Victor hadn't anticipated. Younger, 30s, sitting slightly back from the table in the way of someone whose role was to observe rather than participate. Victor clocked him, filed him, and moved on. He sat down across from Barbu without being invited. Barbu looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "You're younger than I expected." You're exactly what I expected, Victor said. Price put his hand flat on the table. Mr. Lawrence, my client is prepared to discuss a resolution to this matter that— I'm not here for a resolution, Victor said. Price paused. I'm sorry? I'm not negotiating, Victor said. I'm here to tell your client what's going to happen. The room went quiet in a particular way. Barbu's stillness shifted, barely, a micro-adjustment in the set of his jaw. Price's expression did the thing expensive attorneys' expressions did when they were recalibrating behind a neutral face. That's a bold position, Barbu said. It's an accurate one, Victor said. Catherine Hale filed a counter motion this afternoon to block your preliminary residence motion. She attached 31 pages of documentation that includes your email instructions to Petrescu, the original unaltered attendance records with edit timestamps, 14 months of wage deduction records with corresponding transfer confirmations to the Delaware LLC, and a forensic timeline showing the correlation between your investment in the Blackwood Grand and the initiation of the harassment pattern. He paused. The judge will have it by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Price's face had gone very careful. He leaned toward Barbu and said something quietly. Barbu didn't look at him. Petrescu, Barbu said. His voice was flat. He was thorough, Victor said. I'll give him that. Whatever he gave you is inadmissible. He obtained those records in the course of his employment under— That's for your attorney to argue, Victor said. And he's welcome to argue it. While he's arguing it, the judge will also be looking at the custody filing itself, which was submitted 8 months ago using the falsified attendance records as supporting documentation, which means the filing was built on manufactured evidence. A beat. That's fraud on the court. That's a different conversation entirely. Price was writing something on the notepad in front of him. His hand was steady, but it was moving faster than it had been a minute ago. What do you want? Barbu said. The custody modification withdrawn, Victor said. The preliminary residence motion dropped. A signed statement acknowledging that the attendance records were falsified and that the wage deductions were fraudulent. Charlotte Webb's full back pay released within 48 hours. He paused. And your stake in the Blackwood Grand sold within 90 days. To a buyer of the hotel group's choosing. Barbu laughed. It was a short, hard sound with no warmth in it. You walk in here and tell me to surrender everything? I'm telling you what cooperating looks like, Victor said. What not cooperating looks like is the fraud filing, a wage theft civil suit, and a deposition in which Petrescu walks a judge through every instruction you gave him, with the emails. He looked at Barbu steadily. Your attorney knows which one of those is better for you. Price had stopped writing. He was looking at the notepad with the expression of a man running numbers that weren't coming out the way he wanted. You don't have standing to bring any of these actions, Barbu said. You're not her attorney. You're not a party to any of this. No, Victor said, but Catherine Hale is her attorney, and she's already filed, and what I have goes to her and to the DA's office tonight, regardless of what happens in this room. He let that sit. I'm here as a courtesy, because it's faster this way. A courtesy, Barbu repeated. Something moved in his voice, not quite anger, something colder. Galu. He said the name the same way he'd say any name, flat, factual, without theater. You spent 14 months engineering the destruction of your daughter's mother. You put a 7-year-old girl alone in a hotel lobby at midnight because you needed her mother to look unstable for a judge. He paused. I don't have a personal problem with most things. I have a personal problem with that. Something shifted in Barbu's face. Not guilt. Men like him didn't run on guilt. But something like recalibration. The realization that he was in a room with someone who was not operating on the same logic he was used to encountering. She left me, Barbu said, quietly, almost to himself. I know. She took my daughter and she left, and she left a marriage, Victor said. That's allowed. Lily is her daughter too. He watched Barbu's jaw tighten. Whatever happened between you and Charlotte is between you and Charlotte. Using your daughter as a weapon in it is something else. You don't know anything about— I know everything about it, Victor said. I've read every document. I know when you bought into the hotel. I know when you made the call to bring Petrescu in. I know the dates you told him to put in the system. I know the transfer amounts. I know the name of the LLC and whose account it feeds into. He paused. I know that you filed the custody motion 2 weeks after the third false absence was entered into the record. You waited for the documentation to build before you filed. That's not a man acting out of love for his child. That's a man executing a plan. The silence in the room had a particular texture now. The third man, the observer, had gone very still. Price had closed his notepad. Barbu looked at Victor for a long moment. His stillness had changed quality. It was no longer the stillness of a man in control of a room. It was the stillness of a man who had just understood that the room was not his. You're going to have to tell me who you are, Barbu said, because you are not just a hotel guest who happened to meet a housekeeping woman. No, Victor agreed. Then who? Someone who decided this was going to stop, Victor said. That's all you need to know. Price leaned in and spoke quietly to Barbu again. This time Barbu listened. His eyes stayed on Victor while he listened, and Victor held his gaze without difficulty, and after 30 seconds, Barbu looked away first. It was a small thing. It meant a great deal. We'd need time to review, Price started. You have until tomorrow morning, Victor said, before the counter motion is heard. If your client agrees to the terms before 9 a.m., Catherine Hale will request a continuance on the fraud referral pending compliance. If he doesn't, the referral goes in with the morning filing. Price's expression had reached the specific configuration of an expensive attorney who had concluded that his client had badly miscalculated and was now managing consequences. I'll need to consult with my client privately. Of course, Victor said. He stood up. Barbu's voice stopped him at the door. Lawrence? Victor looked back. You think you've won something, Barbu said. His voice was quiet and very controlled, and something underneath it was not controlled at all. You think you've walked in here and fixed it, but I'm Lily's father. That doesn't go away. Whatever you do with the lawyers and the documents, I'm still her father. Victor looked at him for a moment. Then act like it, he said, and walked out. He was in a car heading back toward the hotel when his phone rang. Catherine Hale. The judge reviewed the preliminary motion this evening, she said. The counter filing stopped it. He's not ruling until the full hearing. A beat. She's not going anywhere before March 28th. Victor let out a breath that was the closest thing to relief he'd allowed himself all day. Good. Price called me 20 minutes ago, Catherine continued. Victor sat up slightly. Already? His client wants to discuss terms. Her voice was careful and precise. He didn't say yes to everything, but he didn't say no. What did he say no to? The signed statement. He'll correct the records and release the back pay and drop the modification. The signed acknowledgement of fraud is where he's digging in. A pause. Price says it exposes him to criminal liability. It does, Victor said. That's the point. I know. I'm not backing off it, but I want you to know he's going to fight that piece. Let him fight it, Victor said. We have the documentation either way. The signed statement would be cleaner, but it's not load-bearing. Agreed, she paused. How did the meeting go? He's going to comply on the main points. You sound certain. I am. A brief silence. Can I ask you something? You can ask. What do you actually do? Her voice wasn't quite cautious, more like curious in the way of someone who had gathered enough data points to want to test a hypothesis. Right now, Victor said, I'm making sure a 7-year-old girl gets to stay with her mother. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, fair enough, she paused. I'll call you when I have something confirmed in writing. He hung up. He called Charlotte next. It was past 9. She picked up immediately, which meant she hadn't been sleeping. "Lily's in bed," she said before he could speak. "I've been sitting in the kitchen for 2 hours waiting." "Price called Catherine," Victor said. "Barbu's looking at the terms." He heard her breath catch. Then a sound that wasn't quite a word, something between a gasp and a laugh and a sob, compressed into a single syllable. "Charlotte." "I'm here." Her voice was thick. "I'm here, I'm fine, I just—" She stopped. A moment of silence in which he could hear her steadying herself. "Is it real? Is it actually—" "It's real," Victor said. "It's not completely done. There's still the hearing and the documentation to formalize, but the preliminary motion is blocked. Lily's not going anywhere before March 28th, and by March 28th, we'll have what we need." "Oh God," quietly. "Oh, thank God." He let her have the moment. He didn't rush it. After a while, she said, "He called me tonight. Before you, while I was sitting here, Galou called me." Victor's attention sharpened. "What did he say?" "He said—" She stopped. "He said he heard I'd found myself a protector. He said it like it was something shameful. Like I was—" She cut herself off. "He does that. He finds the thing that should feel good, and he finds a way to make it feel small." "What did you say?" "I didn't say anything. I hung up." "Good." "He also said," her voice dropped slightly, "he said that you couldn't protect me forever, that eventually you'd move on and he'd still be there." A pause. "And I know that's probably true. You have your own life. You're not going to—" "Charlotte," he said it firmly enough to stop her. "One thing at a time. Tonight, the preliminary motion is blocked. Tomorrow, Price files the response to the terms. Next week, Catherine builds the case for the hearing. That's what matters right now." A pause. "You're right. The rest of it, what happens after, that's a different conversation." "Okay." She was quiet for a moment, then, "He left a mark on everything. I keep finding new places where he reached in and touched things without me knowing." A beat. "The hotel, my checks, my record, the court filing. It's like, you know that feeling when you find out someone's been in your house while you were gone, and you don't know everything they touched?" "Yes," Victor said. "It's like that, except it's my life." Her voice was steady, but barely. "My daughter's life." "We're going to find every piece of it," Victor said. "Catherine is thorough. She'll find it all." "And then what? Even if we win, and I want to believe we win, he still exists. He still has money and connections and a documented history of fraud that Sterling Price is currently trying to keep out of criminal court," Victor said. "That's not nothing. Men like him operate on the assumption that no one is watching and no one has the resources to fight back. Both of those assumptions are wrong now." Silence on the other end. Then, "I feel like I should say something better than thank you. Thank you is enough." "It's not, though." Her voice was very quiet. "It isn't close to enough. You don't know what the last 14 months have been. Watching my check get smaller every month and not knowing why. Getting that letter about the absences and knowing it wasn't true, but not being able to prove it. The court filing." A breath. "I told Lily everything was fine. Every single morning I told her everything was fine and sent her to school. And then I went to work for a man who was working against me, and I smiled, and I did my job, and I came home, and I made dinner." A pause. "And I thought I was going to lose her. I thought the judge was going to look at the records and look at my check and think that this woman is falling apart, and I was going to lose my daughter to a man who doesn't even want her. He doesn't want Lily. He wants to win." Victor said nothing. Some things didn't need response. They needed to be heard, and he heard it. "She knows," Charlotte said. "Lily knows more than I've told her. She always does. She asked me 2 nights ago, the night after she met you. She asked me if the bad thing that was happening was going to get fixed." A pause. "She said that. The bad thing. like she'd been waiting for me to be ready to talk about it. What did you tell her? I told her I thought so. A very small pause. I told her I thought we'd found someone who knew how to fix things. Victor was quiet for a moment. She said good, Charlotte continued, and then she went back to her book. A beat, and something that was almost a laugh underneath the exhaustion and the emotion. She's the most self-possessed child. I don't know where she got it. She got it from you, Victor said. She learned it from watching you hold things together. Charlotte didn't say anything for a moment. He could hear her breathing, slightly unsteady, and then steadying. Get some sleep, Victor said. I'll call you when I hear from Catherine. Okay. A pause. Victor? Yeah. Be careful. With Galu, her voice had gone careful. He doesn't forget. And he doesn't, when he decides someone has crossed him, he doesn't let it go. I know. I just want you to know that I know there's a cost to this. For you. And I'm aware of it. Victor looked out the car window at the city moving past. I've managed costs like this before. That doesn't mean you should have to. He didn't answer that because she was right, and there was no useful response to her being right. He said goodnight and hung up and rode the rest of the way to the hotel in the particular silence of a man who had set something in motion and was now calculating every possible way it could go wrong. Barbu was not done. Victor knew that. A man who had spent 14 months building something this precise did not dismantle it overnight because an attorney filed a counter motion. He would comply with the minimum necessary to protect himself from the criminal exposure, and then he would wait, and then he would find another angle. That was what men like him did. They were patient. They were methodical. They believed that time was always on their side because they had resources and the other person was already tired. The mistake Barbu was making was in thinking that Victor's involvement was temporary, that he was a passing intervention, a wealthy guest who'd been moved by a child's story and would return to his regular life once the immediate crisis was resolved. Victor had thought about this on the way to the restaurant. He thought about what Charlotte had said. Eventually you'll move on and he'll still be there. And he'd thought about Lily with her purple backpack and her calendar-marking mother and her old, patient eyes. And he'd made a quiet internal decision that he hadn't told anyone about yet. He was not going anywhere. His phone buzzed at 10:47. A text from a number he recognized as belonging to the third man at the table, the observer he'd clocked and filed and not yet accounted for. The text was brief. My name is Anton. I work for Barbu. I've worked for him for 6 years. I have things you don't have yet. I want to talk. Victor read it 3 times. Then he typed back, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., send me a location. He put the phone down and thought about that for a long time. Someone inside Barbu's operation was flipping, either because they had a conscience or because they were afraid, or because they'd calculated that Barbu's position was weakening and they wanted to be on the right side of what came next. Any of those reasons was workable. None of them changed the fact that if Anton had something Victor didn't have yet, the morning was going to be very interesting. He undressed and lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling for a while, going over the day's architecture. The counter motion filed. Price opening discussions on the terms. The observer reaching out. Charlotte sleeping. He hoped she was sleeping, with Lily in the next room. He thought about what Barbu had said at the end. I'm still her father. That doesn't go away. True, and Victor didn't intend to pretend otherwise. A child's relationship with her father was not something to be destroyed lightly, regardless of what the father had done. If there was a version of this where Barbu became something functional in Lily's life, a reduced but present and honest presence, that was ultimately better for Lily than the alternative. Children needed their parents, even the imperfect ones, even the ones who had done damage. But that was only possible if Barbu stopped using the child as currency. And convincing a man like that to stop was not done through appeals to his better nature. It was done through the clear and unambiguous demonstration that the alternative was worse. Victor was good at demonstrations. He closed his eyes. At 11:59, one final message arrived. Catherine Hale, price confirmed in writing. Barbu will withdraw the custody modification and drop the preliminary motion. Back pay to be released within 48 hours. Records to be corrected by end of week. He's still fighting the signed statement. We'll address that at the hearing. But the main structure holds. Charlotte is safe for now. Victor read it twice, set the phone on the nightstand, put his hands behind his head. For now was doing a lot of work in that sentence. He and Catherine both knew it. Getting through the hearing was the next wall, and the hearing was 2 weeks away, and Barbu's attorney was good, and Barbu was motivated, and the signed statement was still missing, and there were pieces Victor hadn't accounted for yet, including whatever Anton was carrying. But tonight, Charlotte was safe. Lily was in her bed, in her home, with her mother down the hall. That was enough for tonight. Victor closed his eyes. He thought, Anton. 8 a.m. He thought, one more day. And then, for the first time in 36 hours, Victor Lawrence let himself sleep. Anton arrived at 7:54, 6 minutes early, and ordered coffee with the automatic gesture of a man who needed something to do with his hands. He was 34, Victor decided, maybe 35. Up close, without the context of Barbu's table, he looked younger than he had the night before. Not young exactly, but younger than his eyes suggested. His eyes were the eyes of someone who had been watching things he didn't like for a long time and had finally run out of reasons to keep watching. Victor sat down across from him and said nothing. He'd learned a long time ago that silence was the most efficient way to find out what a person actually had. Anton wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I've been with Barbu since 2018, he said. I started as a driver. Then I became other things. He trusted me because I was quiet and I didn't ask questions and I did what he told me. He paused. I stopped being comfortable with what he told me about a year ago. Why a year ago? Victor said. Because a year ago I drove him to a meeting with a family court attorney and I sat in the car and I listened to him on the phone beforehand. And I understood for the first time what the whole operation was actually for. His jaw moved. He wasn't trying to be a father. He was explaining to someone on the phone, laughing, actually, that by the time he was done, Charlotte Webb wouldn't be able to get a job cleaning bathrooms in a bus station, let alone in a hotel, and that the judge was going to hand him the kid, and Charlotte was going to spend the rest of her life knowing he had her. He set down the coffee cup. He said, "That's what you get." The table was very quiet. "That's what you get," Victor repeated. "For leaving him," Anton said. "That's the whole thing. 6 years of his life, all of it, pointed at making her pay for leaving him." He looked at Victor with the directness of a man who had made his decision and was done softening it. I have recordings, 3 of them, phone calls between Barbu and Petrescu. Barbu's voice, Petrescu's voice, specific dates, specific instructions, the kind of thing you can't explain away. Victor looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I watched you walk into that room last night," Anton said, "and I watched Barbu's face when you started talking. And for the first time in 6 years, I saw him afraid." A pause. "I've been waiting for someone to make him afraid." "Recordings can be challenged," Victor said, "depending on how they were obtained." "One-party consent state," Anton said. "I was a party to 2 of the 3 calls. My attorney confirmed it before I came here." Victor absorbed that. He'd come to an attorney before coming here, which meant this wasn't impulse. It was a decision that had been building, possibly for months, and last night's meeting had been the thing that finally tipped it. "Send them to Catherine Hale," Victor said. He wrote her number on a napkin and pushed it across the table. "Today, before noon." Anton took the napkin. "What happens to Barbu?" "That depends on how much he's willing to lose before he stops," Victor said. The recordings, combined with what we already have, it changes the calculus. Significantly. Anton nodded. He stood up, then hesitated. Does she know? Charlotte. Does she know how long this has been going on? How far back it goes? She knows most of it. There's more, Anton said. Before the hotel, before Petrescu, there was a landlord 3 years ago, a building on Mercer Street where she was living. The lease didn't get renewed, and she couldn't find out why. He paused. Barbu owned a stake in the management company. He made one phone call. Victor was still. She had to move with a 4-year-old, Anton said. In February. He looked at the table. I drove him to that meeting too. I didn't understand what it was about until much later. A pause. I should have understood sooner. Yes, Victor said. You should have. Anton nodded once, accepting that, and left. Victor sat with his coffee for 4 minutes without touching it. He was thinking about Charlotte at a kitchen table in February 3 years ago, trying to explain to a 4-year-old Lily why they had to pack their things and move in the middle of winter. He was thinking about how long a person could be targeted without knowing it and still find a way to get up every morning and make tea and mark a calendar and hold themselves together for a child who was watching to see how it was done. He picked up his phone and called Catherine Hale. Recordings, he said when she answered. 3 of them. A man named Anton is sending them to you this morning. One-party consent, he confirmed with his attorney. They document Barbu directing Petrescu on specific dates and specific amounts. Catherine was silent for exactly 2 seconds. That changes the hearing entirely. It also potentially changes what the DA's office does with the criminal referral. Yes, her voice had shifted, not louder, but more concentrated. The voice of someone whose calculation had just rearranged itself around a new variable. If the recordings are clean, he went to an attorney before coming to me, Victor said. He's careful. Victor, a pause. If these recordings are what you're describing, Barbu isn't just losing the custody modification. He's looking at criminal charges, wage theft, fraud on the court, potentially conspiracy. This moves out of family court and into a different arena entirely. I know. Does Charlotte know? Not yet. She needs to know today, Catherine said, because when Price finds out about the recordings, and he will find out, Barbu's posture is going to change. He may try to move first, accelerate something, file something, do something that forces a faster timeline before we can use what we have. How fast can you move? Faster than Price, she said. Get me those recordings. He texted Anton. Send everything to Hale now. Don't wait. The reply came back in 2 minutes. Already sent. Victor allowed himself 1 moment of something that felt like momentum. The specific sensation of multiple pieces locking into position at once. And then he stood up and went to find Charlotte. She was at the hotel. He hadn't known that until his phone showed a text she'd sent at 8:15. I came in for my shift. I needed to feel normal. Is that strange? He found her on the 3rd floor, where she was working her way through the morning turnover with the focused efficiency of someone who had decided that movement was better than stillness. She was straightening a cart in the hallway when she saw him, and she stopped. What happened? She said immediately. She read faces the way her daughter read rooms. We have recordings, Victor said. Phone calls between Barbu and Petrescu. Dated, specific, admissible. Charlotte's hand went still on the cart. How? Someone on his side decided they'd had enough. She processed that. What does it mean for the hearing? It means you're not just defending yourself against a false record anymore, Victor said. It means we're going into that courtroom with evidence that the entire case against you was manufactured from the beginning. Catherine is preparing the filing now. He paused. Charlotte, it also means Barbu may be looking at criminal charges. Not definitely, but possibly. She didn't say anything for a moment. Her expression was careful. The specific carefulness of someone who had been hurt enough times by good news that they'd learned to hold it at a distance until it proved itself real. If the criminal referral moves forward, she said slowly, what does that mean for Lily, for the custody arrangement? It means a father facing criminal charges has very little standing to argue for custody modification. Victor said it plainly, without dressing it up. It likely means the existing arrangement stays in place permanently, which means Lily stays with you. It also means supervised visitation conditions may apply to his contact with her going forward, depending on how the court reads the conduct. Charlotte looked at the wall. Her hand was pressed flat against the side of the cart. Her knuckles were white. Hey, Victor said quietly. She shook her head, not at him, at herself. At the emotion she was trying to manage in a hotel hallway while wearing her work uniform. I'm fine, she said. Give me a second. He waited. After a moment, she turned back. Her eyes were red at the edges, but her face was composed. I want to ask you something. Okay, last night, when you talked to him, to Galu, she looked at Victor directly. Did he say anything about Lily? About actually wanting her? Victor thought about Barbu at that table, the control in his stillness, the cold precision of a man who had built a 14-month plan. That's what you get. That's what Anton had heard him say. No, Victor said. He didn't. Charlotte nodded. Something in her face shifted, a grief that was also, underneath, a terrible kind of relief. The grief of having the thing you suspected confirmed, the relief of no longer having to fight the suspicion. I knew, she said. I've known for a while that this wasn't about her, but there's a part of you that wants to be wrong. You want to believe that somewhere in there is a man who actually wants his daughter, even if he's going about it the wrong, worst way. A breath. I don't think that man exists. No, Victor said. She's going to ask me about him someday, Charlotte said. When she's older, she's going to ask why her father did what he did, and I'm going to have to find a way to tell her the truth without... She stopped. Without breaking something in her. She's going to be okay, Victor said. She's already the person she is. Whatever you tell her, she'll handle it. Charlotte almost smiled. You sound very sure about that. I met her, Victor said. I'm sure. His phone buzzed. Catherine Hale. He held up one finger and Charlotte nodded, and he stepped a few feet down the hall and answered. Price called me 20 minutes ago, Catherine said. Her voice was precise and careful. He knows about the recordings. Anton must have told someone or Barbu has coverage on Anton too, Victor said. Possibly. Either way. Price is requesting an emergency settlement conference. Today. He said his client wants to resolve this fully and finally. A beat. Victor, that's a complete reversal from where they were 12 hours ago. The recordings, Victor said. The recordings, she confirmed. He's not going to fight this in open court with those recordings in evidence. Whatever Barbu was willing to gamble before, he's recalculating. What does full and final resolution look like from their side? They're proposing, and I want to be clear this is their opening, not my recommendation, withdrawal of all modifications, correction of records, full back pay, and a mutual agreement on existing custody terms. In exchange for Charlotte agreeing not to pursue the criminal referral and not to pursue civil damages. Victor was quiet for a moment. Catherine, what's your recommendation? I think we can get more, she said without hesitation. The signed acknowledgement of fraud, which they refused yesterday, a formal order of protection if Charlotte wants one, and the criminal referral. I don't recommend trading that away. That referral isn't ours to trade. The DA's office will make their own decision about whether to proceed. So Price is offering something he doesn't have the power to guarantee. He's trying to, which is telling. A pause. He's scared. Barbu is scared. I want us to walk into that conference from a position that reflects that. Set it up, Victor said, today, and tell Price the criminal referral is not on the table. The DA's office decides that, not us. That might blow up the conference. Let it blow up, Victor said. We go to the hearing in 2 weeks with the recordings, the documents, and Anton's testimony if he's willing. We win the hearing, and then we let the DA decide what to do with the rest. A brief silence. Then, I like that better, Catherine said. He hung up and walked back to Charlotte. She'd heard enough from his side of the conversation to know the shape of it. She looked at him with her arms folded across her chest. Not defensively, but in the way of someone bracing. They want to settle, Victor said. Today, because of the recordings. And Catherine is going to push for everything. The signed acknowledgement, the formal protection order. She's not trading the criminal referral. The DA's office makes that call. Charlotte unfolded her arms. Then she said something that surprised him. What happens if we push too hard and he walks away? We go to the hearing with everything we have, Victor said, and we win. You're that certain? Yes. Why? Because the recordings are real, and the documents are real, and the timestamps are real, Victor said, and because the judge is going to look at a man who bought into his ex-wife's employer specifically to manufacture the grounds to take her daughter. And that judge is going to understand exactly what kind of man is asking for custody. He paused. Judges have seen this before. The difference is most people don't walk in with 31 pages of documentation and 3 phone recordings. Charlotte looked at him for a long time. Her expression had moved through several things and arrived somewhere that he hadn't seen on her face before. Not hope, exactly. More solid than hope. More grounded. Okay, she said. Push. The settlement conference happened at 2 o'clock in Catherine Hale's office, and Victor was not in the room for it. That was Charlotte's room, Charlotte's fight, and he had understood from the beginning that his role was to put the weapons in her hands, not to fight for her. She walked in with Catherine at 1:58, in clean clothes, her hair pulled back, and the expression of a woman who had been fighting alone for 14 months and was not alone anymore. He waited in Catherine's reception area and answered emails and did not look at the clock more than twice. At 3:44, the door opened. Catherine came out first, then Charlotte. Charlotte's face was, he had spent enough time reading her face in the past 4 days that he had a vocabulary for it by now. And what he saw was something he hadn't seen there before. Not relief, not victory exactly, something quieter and more permanent. The specific settling that happens in a person's face when a weight they've been carrying for so long they forgot it was there is finally, actually, gone. He signed everything, Catherine said. Full acknowledgement of fraud, custody modification withdrawn, permanent order of protection, full back pay released today. She paused. He also agreed not to contest an emergency motion to amend the custody order, which I'm filing this afternoon. With the fraud acknowledgement on record, the existing arrangement becomes formally protected. It would require extraordinary circumstances to revisit. Meaning Lily stays with her mother, Victor said. Meaning Lily stays with her mother, Catherine confirmed. Charlotte sat down in one of the reception chairs. Not because she was tired, or maybe because she was, finally, for the first time in a long time, allowing herself to be. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the floor, and then she laughed. A short, real, unguarded sound that had nothing performed about it. He signed it, she said. He actually signed it. He signed it, Catherine said. Charlotte looked up at Victor. You should know, she said, that at one point during the conference, his attorney tried to take the signed acknowledgement off the table again. And I said, no. A pause. I said, no. Catherine looked at me and I said, no. Good, Victor said. I've been saying yes for a long time, Charlotte said. To things I shouldn't have said yes to things I should have fought. Her voice was even and honest. I'm done with that. Victor nodded. He went to see Lily that evening. Charlotte had asked if he wanted to come for dinner, and he'd said yes before he'd finished thinking about it, which was unusual for him. He was a man who thought before he said yes to things. He sat at the same kitchen table where Charlotte had told him about the calendar, and Lily sat across from him and ate her pasta with the composed focus of a child who had decided that dinner was a serious undertaking. Halfway through the meal, Lily looked up. "Charlotte told me," she said, using her mother's first name the way she sometimes did, with the easy authority of a child who had at some point decided that the distinction between child and adult was mostly administrative. "About the court thing, about the records, about what you did." Victor looked at her. "She told you everything?" "The important parts." Lily twirled her fork. "She said someone built a trap and you took it apart." A pause. "She said you were good at that." "Sometimes," Victor said. Lily considered that. She cried a little. When she was telling me, she tried not to, but I saw. She said it matter-of-factly, without drama. "She doesn't cry in front of me usually." "I know." "I think she was crying because she was relieved," Lily said. "Not because she was sad." "Yes," Victor said. "I think so too." Lily put down her fork. She looked at Victor with those gray-blue eyes that had been doing this since the first night, looking at him like she was reading something the rest of the world hadn't written yet. "Are you going to keep being around?" she asked. "Or was this just the kind of thing where you fixed it and then you go?" The table went very quiet. Charlotte, across from him, had gone still. Victor looked at the calendar on the fridge, the neat blue check marks, every single day. He looked at Lily. "I'm going to be around," he said. Lily picked up her fork again. "Okay," she said, like the matter was settled, which to her apparently it was. Later, when Lily was in her room and Victor was at the door putting on his jacket, Charlotte stood in the hallway and said, "She's going to hold you to that." "I'm counting on it," Victor said. Charlotte looked at him. The carefulness was still there. It didn't go away overnight in a person who'd learned to be careful. But behind it, something had opened. Something that had been held shut for a long time. "Thank you," she said. "And I know you told me thank you was enough. But it isn't. It will never be enough. So I'm going to keep saying it until I find the words that are." "You've got time," Victor said. He walked out into the night, and the city moved around him the way it always did. Loud and indifferent and continuous. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment and thought about a girl in a lobby, and a mother on an elevator, and a calendar on a refrigerator, and 14 months of carefully constructed cruelty that had finally, completely come apart. He thought about what it cost a person to stay standing when everything was working against them. He thought about the specific courage of a woman who marked her attendance every single day, not because anyone was watching, but because she knew the truth about herself and refused to let go of it. He put his hands in his pockets and walked. Some things in this world broke the people they were aimed at, and some things, the ones aimed at the wrong people, broke themselves instead against the particular stubbornness of a mother who would not quit, a daughter who would not look away, and a man who had walked into a hotel lobby one rainy night and decided, for reasons he didn't entirely have words for yet, that this was going to stop. It had stopped, and that, in the end, was enough.